Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Kim. How are you today?
I'm well. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm excited about what we're getting ready to talk about. I think we're going to do a three-part series on this topic, but it's going to give some real insight into, the foundation of who we are as a company and what we do.
Yeah,
Um, I
I'm looking forward to it.
I just before we get started though, I do want to say our disclaimer up front that this is for education and information purposes only. We are not financial advisors or attorneys or CPAs, but we have a level of expertise we want to share with our community. And so I think it's going to take three parts to be able to really help people understand how we invest in notes, especially non-performing notes, right? So
Hmm.
I welcome you to the Kim and Jerry podcast today. And Jerry, I'm going to let you start off and then, I'll join in.
Yeah.
Okay?
All right. Well, we keep getting a lot of questions because one of the things that we buy for our personal portfolios, not necessarily for investor portfolios, are
Right.
non-performing notes, and in particular, non-performing seconds. And we've been asked on numerous occasions, why would you do that? So we wanted to kind of walk folks through it. And frankly, um, it's interesting. I've been doing non-performing seconds for about 7, 8 years. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until like 8 years into it, people told me, "Oh, those are really hard." you know, and it's like, well, now you're telling me. Why
Right.
didn't you tell me this 8 years ago?
Right.
So,
Right. I tell you, when I began note investing, I began in non-performing notes. And making my way through the circuit of different investors, if you will, um, I thought this is the way you buy notes. I thought
yeah,
this is what you do. Yeah, and I thought it was the process. If I wanted to be a note investor, that the process is what we do for non-performing notes, and I didn't question it. I just wanted to understand how to effectively invest in notes, and
yeah,
so that's how
yeah,
I got
and
involved in it.
yeah, and same here. And the other thing I'll say, and in all seriousness, it's also the way that I personally built capital faster.
Mhm.
And if you think about any type of an investment, when you're taking a bit more risk, you will hopefully have a good outcome and a much higher return on your investment. So
Right.
that's what we have here. So through the course of this series, at least three parts, we'll talk a little bit about performing and non-performing notes. And I want to start off by just kind of giving people a definition of what's a performing note and what's a non-performing note.
Yeah.
A performing mortgage note is where the borrower is paying the payment as agreed, and whether that's the first of the month, 15th of the month, whatever, they're paying according to the contract that they signed. A non-performing note is when the borrower is in default and they are not paying according to the contract. Default from a payment perspective is if they have not made a payment within 90 days.
Hmm.
So we buy notes where people haven't made a payment in over 90 days. And in some cases, they haven't made a payment in 10 years. You know, it's a little crazy. Um, but anyway, that is the legal definition of a default. Now, there are other factors that could cause a note to go into default, but for the notes that we buy, that's what we're looking at. Are
Right.
they paying the mortgage? Are they not paying the mortgage?
Right.
And obviously the question is, you guys don't look crazy. Why would you do that?
Right. I've been
And
asked, why do
yeah,
you invest in something that's not performing? Right.
yeah. And I'll kind of walk you through. One of the primary reasons, I kind of mentioned it earlier, is the returns.
Hmm.
When I buy a performing note, it's a very stable asset. And like I said, I buy that for my investors. We
Right.
buy, it's a stable asset, it is secure, it's a fixed payment. You know when you buy it what you're going to get as a return off of that note.
Right.
Um, so if it's an 8% return, every month you're going to get 8% for how many ever months, how many ever payments are left.
Right.
So
Right.
very nice, very stable, lower
Very
risk,
consistent.
very consistent. With a non-performing note, your return is erratic.
Yeah,
You don't know on day one when you are going to get the borrower to start paying again, or will some other event occur to in the process of this note's of the life of this note.
right.
And because of that, you discount that note much higher. And the reason you discount it is because you don't know, because of the uncertainty. So
Yeah,
part of the reason for the really high returns is that we're buying those notes at a fairly deep discount. Back when I started doing this, you would get 30 cents on a 35 cents on a dollar.
right.
Today, we're talking, somewhere between 45 and as high, hopefully under 60 cents on a dollar.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So as a result,
That's the sweet spot right now.
yeah, yeah. And as a result of that, again, we've always talked about there are three possible things that can happen when you buy a note. They either pay as agreed, they pay it off early, or they fail to pay. Well, if they pay it off early, when they pay it off, you get all of that discount money because the borrower owes the entire legal balance. I only paid 40 cents or 50 cents, so I'm going to get the other 50 cents when the note is paid off. The other thing is
Let's
if it,
expand on that point about the legal balance, because that's something that's not taken into consideration when people are looking at, non-performing notes. They
true,
see one number value, which is the UPB, right? But
yes,
there's a
complete
whole
balance,
nother value to take into consideration, which is the legal value, right?
yes,
And the legal value, all the back payments, right? All the
mm-hmm,
late fees, the interest that's involved, and
mm-hmm,
any other fee that accrued during that time in accordance to the promissory note, right? So
yes, yes,
um, if it gets paid off early and you bought it at a deep discount, you get that reward of all of that has accumulated
yes,
into the legal value.
yes, and all of that just flows into your return on that particular note. So
Yes,
um, that's why we will invest in those notes. It will give us a much higher return. It allows me to build my portfolio faster. And frankly, we use the proceeds from the non performing to go buy the stable, steady performing notes.
right,
Because
right.
over the long haul, we want steady, stable, easy,
Absolutely.
easy returns.
Right, but it does afford you the opportunity to make the investment in the performing notes versus what it would take to buy the non-performing notes. And
Sure.
with that, as we've just talked about, you can hear the work, the due diligence that has to go into buying a non-performing note, looking at all those factors that are involved in the time span in which the note was not performing.
That's true. That's very true. And that's a really great way to kind of segue into what's the process. We
Hmm.
talk about buying a performer versus a non-performer, or even just buying financial assets in general. You have to look at the risk, and you have to look at how do I mitigate that risk. We talked a minute ago about I'm buying at a discount. So one of my risk mitigation factors is with a performing note, I have a lower discount. It may be 5%, 10%, 15% off of face. With a non-performer, I am talking 50% off of face
Hmm.
or
Right,
55% off of face.
right,
That is one of my risk mitigation strategies because at the end of the day, the house that is the collateral for this note is worth substantially more than that.
right,
So as a
right,
result, I know going in, I've mitigated some of the risk of the investment that I've paid because I got this huge house. And what in one of the segments, we'll be talking some case studies, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
right, right. No,
Where you have a house that's a $300,000 house, and I have a $5,000 note on it, I know I'm going to get paid. Or
right.
that my expectation is that I should get paid.
Right. It's a very low risk. It just needs to
Yeah.
be managed and executed.
Yes.
appropriately,
Yes.
because it is collateralized, and so the debt must be paid, one
Yes.
way or the other. And typically, what has happened with non-performing notes is that for some reason the borrowers think that it went away, or they
Mhm.
forgot about it, or they thought it was absorbed in a different loan. um, and so the thing is to make sure that everyone understands the the exacts of that particular note and what needs to be done to bring it into either performing, or it needs to get paid off.
Agreed. Agreed. So as we're looking at a note, I'm going to want to talk you kind of through the process that we go through to kind of
Hmm.
help us mitigate that risk.
Yeah.
It begins with due diligence. We do very heavy due diligence. And, I'll use a, Kim, you had an example. We buy performing notes, we buy non-performing notes. And we use the same due diligence process, whether it's a performing note or a non-performing note. And Kim one day said, well, gee, what you're doing on a performing note is like killing an ant with a hammer. you know, we're looking at everything. And it
Yeah.
always amazes us that with performing notes, a lot of the stuff we're looking for, most people don't. And it's just
Right.
because when you are getting into a situation where you know that the borrower has not paid, you want to look at all kinds of avenues, all kinds of angles, all kinds of things to make sure that you are doing something that is prudent.
Right. Right.
we're not playing. We're not at Caesar's Palace. Putting our money down on the roulette table. We're doing something that is prudent, and we want to make
Right.
sure that we get our money back. That's the
And
most important
frankly,
thing.
it's a reflex for me because I don't know any better.
Yeah,
I was introduced to the note world through non-performing notes and due diligence, and I love it. I mean, it's still my personal preference, personally, to
mhm,
invest in non-performing notes than to performing notes. But like you said, for the investors that invest with us, we always do performing notes.
yeah,
But uh, with that, I can't help myself still taking those steps that I still think are necessary, or at least
yeah,
I can say, I at least took a look at it, right?
yeah,
And so,
yeah. And
uh,
it's not to say that when we're looking at a performing note, we're not thorough. We are very thorough.
yeah.
It's just that we go deeper when we're looking at a non-performing note. And
And factors take a different precedence, right?
yeah,
That don't
yeah.
take with the performing note.
Yes. Yeah. And there, and speaking of those factors, there are four things that we really do that are the keys to driving our due diligence. The first is we look at the property. We look at the condition of the property. We send somebody over and we get eyeballs on that property. So I have a whole slew of pictures of the house before we bought it. But before we buy it, and I think about one particular asset that we bought. One of our partners, Steve, happened to be in the area when we were going through doing our diligence on this house. So he drove over to the house. He's taking not only pictures, he's taking videos of the house. The good news is the homeowners didn't know who in the heck he was,
Right.
and we have those in our file. So we knew what the house looked like. So we look at the condition of the house. We also look at what kind of equity do you have in the house. So we're
Yeah.
looking at, what lien position are we in and what the various loans are on that house.
Yeah.
So we will never, and we'll talk about buy box later, we will never buy a house that does not have equity
Right.
because our thinking is that as this relationship with that note progresses, we want to make sure that the owner, the borrower, has a reason to want to work with us to keep the house or to do something with the house.
Right.
Because I don't really want the house. I just want to get my money.
Right.
So, equity in a house generally says that the borrower wants to keep the house. So we're looking at that as well. And then as we're sort of walking through, we're thinking about if we were to acquire this house, how do we dispose of it? Where do we dispose of it? Are there, is it a neighborhood that we can rent the house out? Can we resell it really quickly? Are there wholesalers out there? So we're looking at all of those kinds of things. And then finally, we're looking at pride of ownership.
Right.
And, later on in this series, we'll show you some houses that we have, you know, um, bought the notes on, and you'll see it's well landscaped.
Right.
That's an indicator to me that the borrower likes their house and they intend to be there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these are key drivers on looking at the property.
Right. No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can see the personality of the borrower through
Hmm.
pictures of the house, right?
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and
And
with non-performing, that's one of the, I know you're going to get there. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to take your thunder, but looking at the house, that's one of the factors that are involved that,
Mhm.
we need to understand the borrower.
Yeah. And speaking of borrower, you just walk right into my next piece. We look at the
Yeah.
borrower. And, again, pride of ownership and financial condition of the borrower. Some of the financial condition of the borrower will show up when we look at the house. Is the grass cut? Is it painted? Um, are the shrubs trimmed? If you don't have the financial wherewithal, those are some of the indicators that there could be a bigger issue. So with the borrower, again, we start with the financial condition. We look at their credit report. And what I'll tell you about the credit report is yes, there's a FICO score, and FICO tells, how well they manage their debt, how well they manage their creditors, but FICO doesn't really tell you everything about the character and the current situation of the borrower. I'll
Yeah.
give you an example. I did a private note on a borrower, and she had a 580 FICO score. And you
Mm.
go, why would you loan money to somebody with a 580 FICO score? Because she was a 700 FICO score masquerading as a 580 FICO score.
Yeah. That whole algorithm is kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
And when I say that, what do I mean? Well, this is a person, when you think about how FICO works, if you are an individual that buys something, pays it off, uses it, and don't go back and buy another car until the last car is dead, your FICO score is going to be very low.
Right.
If you only use credit cards every now and then, so you don't have a very high credit limit, if you buy a loaf of bread, your FICO score is going to drop.
Right.
So this was the situation with this particular borrower where you look at the credit report, the number and the character were out of sync. I've also
Right.
had situations where people have a 750 FICO score and they haven't paid their mortgage in 2 years. So we look at the FICO, we look at the credit report, we review the credit report. We want to make sure we understand every aspect of who is the person behind this debt, and is it somebody that you can work with?
Right.
So character is really big for us. We also, on your credit report, they will say whether you're employed or not employed, whether you're retired or whatever. And those are factors that will go into should you buy this piece of paper. And then finally, one of the big things for us is we're looking for scofflaws. There are folks that are serial bankruptcy people,
Yeah.
and that's how they manage their debt. They'll file bankruptcy every 3, 5, 7, whatever it is years. And you'll see that as you're going through looking at their background.
Right.
We don't do that. There are other folks. There are other scams that we've seen out there, and I'm not going to get into those on this video. But we're looking for things like that to give us an indication of, is this a borrower that when we are trying to work with them to work out their loan, will they be cooperative? Will not so much will they be cooperative? Will they want to work with us?
Right. Are they really invested in
Yes.
doing the right thing, if you
Yeah.
will?
Are they invested
Um,
in their life?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 But the payment history will also tell you their priorities in life, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, they'll let one thing go, but they won't let the other. The car note is always paid on time. The house, the first lien is always paid on time, but
Yeah.
everything else may fall to the wayside. So,
Yeah.
but it tells you that their house is definitely important to them, right? Their car
Yes.
is definitely
Yeah.
important to them. They're obviously trying to go back and forth to work. So, you begin to understand a lot about the borrower from the payment history, and of the credit report of the borrower.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. So borrower, obviously a big factor in this. The other thing that we look at is location. There are some states we do not buy in, just because of the litigious nature of those states. you know, I don't want to. Life's too
yeah,
short to have to deal with some of that stuff. So
yeah,
we look
there's
at whether
a lot more
it's a
states to work with.
what's that?
A lot more states to work with.
Yeah, there are 50 states, so you don't have to deal with all of them if you don't want to. 50 states in the
Exactly.
District of Columbia, so 51. Um, so one of the things we look at is it a judicial state versus a non-judicial state. What does that mean? In some states, to go through foreclosure, you have to go through the court system. In other states, you go through, I'll call it the magistrate, a non-court type of a system for doing the foreclosure.
Right.
I
Yeah.
have found that that is a good kind of differentiator, but there are subtleties among states. So there may be some states that are judicial that I'll go through anyway, or so
Right.
it doesn't that is not a primary factor, but it is one of the factors that we look at.
And you
So,
can get a pretty good idea if you've never been in that state to talk with
mhm,
an attorney of
yep,
that state, to see, what is the expectation, what is going to be required, and
absolutely,
what you can possibly work yourself through or into that, could make a difference. Or you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to push through on this one. So
absolutely,
there are many supporting factors and supporting people that can help you in regards to investing in non-performing loans.
absolutely. The other thing that I'll talk about, that I want to say about location, we also look at economy.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it a growing economy? Is it a shrinking economy? And the
Mm-hmm.
reason is, again, when you go back to the property, if we have to take possession of that property, can we sell it? If
Mm-hmm.
everybody's moving out of town, it's very difficult to sell a house.
Right.
So that's an issue for us, and something that we will also look for or look at.
But there's quite a few exit strategies, right, that you can take with a note, and so
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't be discounted when doing the due diligence. If you end
Absolutely.
up with that property, what is your plan of action, or what are
Ab-
your options, right? So, and there's quite a few you could take advantage of that,
yeah.
still could make the investment very good,
Yes. For us, finally on location, we look at, is it urban, suburban, or rural?
right?
And again, because we're thinking, if we have to take possession of the house, what will be the difficulty of being able to move that property? And again, when you think about that, again, going back to performing versus non-performing, with the performing note, you don't really care. You're getting payments. With a non-performing, there's a possibility that something could happen, and we want to be able to make sure that rural, suburban, urban, that it factors into our thinking.
Yeah.
Not to say that we don't buy urban, or we don't buy suburban, or we don't buy rural. We're buying all over, but that is one of the factors. Final thing is the quality of the paper.
Yeah.
We are buying paper,
Yes.
and not all paper is the same. Through the course of our diligence, through the course of our dealing, buying enough notes, you see that there is a different quality of paper coming from various banks. Some
Yeah.
banks are really thorough. They keep all of their paperwork, they keep the files. Other banks, less so.
That's a nice way of putting it. Less
Yeah,
so.
I'm not trying to piss off one of my suppliers.
But now it becomes a challenge. You're putting the puzzle together. You're trying to create that whole journey between the borrower and payment plan, etc.
Yeah.
But the quality of the paper is important,
Yes.
because you got to think at the end, right? of the
Yeah,
note. If for the
yeah.
steps
You,
that you may need to take,
yeah, you
you
want to
need
make
the
sure,
quality of the paper.
absolutely, you want to make sure that the packet that you're getting is complete.
Yes,
So, are all of the documents there? Are the minimum required documents there? Um, and can you touch those documents? Where are
right,
they located? Those are things that are very important to us.
right,
Now, in some cases, when I say that, there are banks that are very thorough, I may have the application, the picture of the driver's license of the borrower. I will have check stubs, all that stuff in the packet. Then there are others, you may not, like I said, may not be as complete.
right.
So we look at the quality of the paper because again, we're thinking about, well, what are the other factors that could factor into this? Then the final thing, which is not a standard part of our due diligence, and Kim kind of alluded to that, is in some cases when we're looking at paper, we'll talk to a legal advisor.
Hmm.
So we have, as part of our world, a number of attorneys that we use on a regular basis, and we'll call them up and kind of walk through our thinking about the legal aspects of a particular note. You know, is this enforceable? I'm thinking about doing it this way. What are your thoughts? How would you counsel me? How would you guide me? Because at the end of the day, if this does go sideways, if it does go bad, guess what? I'm going to throw
Right.
it on you and you got to fix it.
Hmm.
And lawyers tend to be grateful if you get them involved at the beginning so they can help you so that you don't make a mistake
Right.
and make it harder for them on the backside. So again, that's one of the other aspects that we do to kind of again mitigate the risk.
Mitigate the risk, right? And
Yeah.
and they don't mind speaking with you, walking
Yeah.
through. They take the
No,
time. And they want to be engaged, right? And in the event that you need their services further, they've already been, introduced to the note and had some history on it, right? So,
absolutely.
and it does sound like a lot. It sounds like, oh my God, I don't think I'm ever going to invest in non-performing notes, but um, we do this every day. In fact, we have a community, right? Yeah, I'm going to say about a community that we call the Shield. So we ask that you connect with the Shield, and because at the Shield, at the table, in the community, we will work notes together, do the due diligence, help each other out, you know, collaborate, joint venture, right? There's a lot of opportunity that we call the Shield, right? With
Mhm.
a community
Absolutely.
that's involved, and it's I want to say it's fun. It's exhilarating. And you learn something new every day, and no two notes are the same, and we're rolling up our sleeves and we're ready to go, and it becomes a part of you, which is why this is what we do. And we
Absolutely.
love it. We love it. And we just want to help others be able to embrace non-performing notes, and
Mhm.
that this is a viable investment. It's a different type of investment with notes, right? As far as expectation, does take patience, but it is very rewarding, and
Absolutely.
the yield
And
is very high, right?
yeah,
So
and
it's
the
very
the other thing, final thing about that is just like with any other note, there are only three things that can happen.
right.
The borrower is
Right,
going to pay as agreed, and you'll come up with some kind of a plan to have them pay. It's going to be paid off early. Either the property gets sold, they get refied, um, or they just come up with some money. So they pay it off early, or then the third factor, they fail to pay you fail to come up with an agreement, and then there's some disposal of that piece of property. So
right,
three things can happen,
right.
and that's it. There's nothing else beyond that. So
And that holds true for the performing note as well, right? So
absolutely,
there's no difference. There's only three outcomes of any note, and non-performing is not an exception to that. So it's just something you become a part of and committed to the process of investing in non-performing notes. Yeah.
true.
Um, But this was great. I think that I'm excited to talk a little bit about part two of this
Okay.
series because we'll talk about the due diligence that's really the success factor of investing in non-performing notes, right?
Yeah.
And we'll take our time going through that to help people understand what's involved there. But I think it does warrant to have its own podcast session and focus so that people can come back to it at any time and be sure that they can check all the boxes, if you will, if they are going to move into the realm of non-performing notes. So, and then we'll further down the line, we're also going to show some real life case studies that we've had that are very much what we do every single day. So I'm excited. And,
Good.
I appreciate you, of course, Jerry. Um, for our viewers, if you want to learn more about us, First Shield Financial, you're welcome to go to www.firstshieldfinancial.com. This YouTube, I ask that you please subscribe and like. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us, or connect with us in some way if you have any questions. We really enjoy note investing, and we enjoy those who want to join our community and get involved. Thank you.
All
Have
right.
anything, Jerry, more you want to add?
That's it.
Okay. Till
All
next
right.
time.
You take care.
You too.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.